What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Hutch Coming in Clutch. I'm your host, Hutchison Brown, and today we got a fantastic show. I hope you had a great week one waiver wire experience. I hope you got Harold Fan Jr. in a lot of your leagues. I know I did this week, bit up him a lot, but this week we got a jam-packed, or today we've got a jam-packed show. We're going to be talking about some injury updates, bringing you my Coming in Clutch or Oh Fudge Players of the week, which had a really good hit rate on, by the way, last week. And then we're going to jump into some listener Q&A, answering some questions. And then lastly, we're going to bring on head of content at Fantasy Alarm at RotoBudsGuy on Twitter, Howard Bender, to do the over-unders with us. Last week, me and Andy did a pretty bad job. I went 0 for 3. Andy went 1 for 3. So we got to do better this week with Howard Bender. We'll see how that goes. But before I get into the show today, please follow me on Twitter. I'm at HutchisonB_FF. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening so you'll be notified every single time a new episode does drop. I want to quickly apologize to any of my YouTube subscribers out there. We had a problem on YouTube. I wasn't able to get the video file up. The video file had some really bad functions with it, malfunctions with it, and it just wasn't good enough to post. So I wasn't able to get things up on YouTube. I posted about it on Twitter this week. Hopefully we'll get it up this week. I think we'll be all good. I mean, if you're watching this on YouTube, I did get it up this week. So we're good back to normal scheduling with YouTube, hopefully. But I just wanted to apologize for that real quick. But without further ado, let's get into the episode today. We got some breaking news to discuss. First thing we're discussing is Brock Purdy, quarterback of the 49ers, dealing with toe and shoulder injuries, very likely to miss week 2 per most reports. The vibes are really bad around these injuries. I expect him to miss this week and possibly more than that, but hopefully just a couple weeks. Now, looking at the rest of this offense, we also have injuries to George Kittle and Juwan Jennings with their respective injuries. George Kittle on IR. Juwan Jennings expected to miss this week as well. So it's going to be Mac Jones and Ricky Pearsall carrying the 49ers offense along with Christian McCaffrey in the backfield. And honestly, I'm not too worried for fantasy about that. I mean, Mac Jones, obviously, I'm not really playing for fantasy unless you're in desperate need of a QB2, then that's fine. But looking at Ricky Pearsall, we saw what Mac Jones did with Brian Thomas Jr. last year. He was very efficient for the offense, and he was very good at targeting Brian Thomas Jr. I expect similar things for Ricky Pearsall, who had a fantastic week 1, made some huge plays. And Christian McCaffrey, I mean, Mac Jones is good enough to dump off the ball to McCaffrey 5-6 times in a game. So I think you got a good fantasy floor there. So I'm honestly not crazy worried about this offense because there's so less target competition now for these players that I think we're going to see hyper usage for Christian McCaffrey, who had 31 touches last week, and Ricky Pearsall, who's the only healthy option in this 49ers receiving room right now. Now, heading to the running back position, Christian McCaffrey, questionable with a calf injury, but I expect him to play. Don't think we're going to see anything serious here. However, if you do get a trade offer for him that gives you top 5 running back prices, I'd be willing to take that offer. McCaffrey's dealing with a calf injury, and everybody is keeping a very close eye on him. If he were to go down, if he were to have more serious reports about the injury, if he were to start missing practice, people are going to lose their minds, and his ceiling, his value is going to completely fall off. And as a result, you're going to be stuck with him. But right now, we had a great performance last week, 31 touches, looked solid on them, especially in the receiving game. And as of now, we're healthy for week 2. So if you can get those top 5 running back prices, go for it. Now, Quishon Judkins, this isn't injury news, but meeting with the NFL and New York to discuss potential discipline, discuss everything, about his legal situation, all that stuff. I'm not an legal expert. I'm not, someone who is deep into that world. So I don't know what's going to happen with Quishon Judkins. It could be a couple games. It could be no games. Given that the criminal charges were dropped, I would expect that the suspension, if anything, is going to be a couple games, but he might not get one at all, and we might see him play football this week. So if he is on your waiver wires, pick him up. I know he's available in about 20 to 25% of sleeper leagues right now. If he's available, get him on your rosters, and if he's still able to trade for him cheap, I would trade for him. He's an immensely talented running back, and this backfield looked terrible in the running game last week. I know we saw Dylan Sampson catch 8 passes, but he didn't look great on them. I think Quishon Judkins, when he comes in, is going to take over this backfield pretty quickly. Now let's look at the wide receiver position for injury updates. Drake London, Darnell Mooney, both for the Falcons, both had shoulder injuries. Darnell Mooney in the offseason, Drake London suffered his in week 1. Both are practicing and both are expected to play in week 2. That is excellent to see. They're going to need those two players, the Falcons are, against Minnesota Vikings if they want to have a chance in this potential shootout game with the Minnesota Vikings on Sunday Night Football. Now, Jaden Reed and Christian Kirk, questionable for week 2. Jaden Reed with that foot injury he's been dealing with. I think he's got to play since he played last week. And Christian Kirk with that hamstring injury. I'd expect him to play, but I would not expect huge things for fantasy. Now, Xavier Worthy for the Chiefs. Obviously, he ran into Travis Kelce ran into him and dislocated his shoulder in that week 1 contest against the Chargers. Dislocated shoulder. His timeline is still questionable. We don't fully know what's happening. But what we do know is that he's not expected to need surgery. That's great. That would mean that hopefully within the next couple of weeks, he can come back to football. But even if he is playing, I would not be super, super excited to start him in fantasy ball this week against the Philadelphia Eagles, whose secondary is really, really good with Quinyon Mitchell. Obviously, in the second corner is really bad, but Quinyon Mitchell is likely going to be facing Xavier Worthy, speedster on speedster. So I don't think that this is going to be a great matchup for him overall. Now let's look at Juwan Jennings. Obviously, he's not practicing, could play, but we were talking about him earlier, but I want to talk about him specifically, not just how he affects Ricky Pearsall. If he plays, I'm not playing him for fantasy. Not only do you have a downgrading quarterback in Mac Jones, but Juwan Jennings also caught 2 passes last week. He just didn't seem to be fully involved in this offense, and now he's hurt. Questionable for week 2. Seems like he would be a limited role if he played. I'm just not interested for fantasy football. So Juwan Jennings is somebody that no matter what, he's on my bench. Now let's look at the tight end position. George Kittle, 49ers, suffered a hamstring injury and is on IR. He's going to miss at least 4 weeks. When you saw him come out of the blue tent immediately with a hat on, you kind of knew that this was not a good injury. He's going to miss 4 weeks. He's going to be on IR, and he might miss more than that. We'll have to see. But for now, George Kittle's on your bench, and the rest of the San Francisco receiving room gets a small upgrade. Now, Isaiah Likely for the Ravens, out for week 2 with a foot injury. Darren Waller out with a hip injury. And then Brock Bowers left with a knee injury, but stated that he's fine. There are no concerns. We talked about this on Tuesday's episode. Again, he is restating there are no concerns and he's going to be totally fine for this week. He's practicing, so I expect him to be totally fine and in your lineups. And then Mason Taylor, he ran a lot of routes, played a lot of the snaps, seemed to be the starting tight end for the Jets, only earned a couple targets, but the one catch he had was really, really solid. He looked good on his routes to me. And with Garrett Wilson as the only clear-cut option in this offense, there's room for a second option to grow in here. And Justin Fields looked excellent as a passer. So when you have Garrett Wilson, there's more room for a number 2 receiving threat, and Mason Taylor could develop into that this year. So it sucks to see him off the side in practice with an ankle injury. But if he were to come back this week, keep an eye on him for fantasy purposes. I wouldn't be starting him unless you're in like a 32-team league or you're absolutely completely desperate and no other options. But keep an eye on him at least. Now, let's head into my coming in clutch or Oh Fudge Players of the week. My coming in clutch players are simple players that are going to come in clutch in your fantasy football lineups this week. You should have them in your starting lineups. And my Oh Fudge players that you're look back after the weekend and say, oh, fudge. Why did I have that player in my lineup? My coming up clutch player this week at quarterback is going to be Drake May. I'm targeting the Miami matchup yet again. I had Daniel Jones last week against Miami, finished as a top 5 quarterback on the week. I think the similar things could happen for Drake May. Drake May is a great rushing quarterback. We saw 4 rushing attempts last week. Obviously, they didn't turn into much. The defense in Las Vegas was on him, but Miami, I don't know if they're going to be because Daniel Jones is able to run all over them. He's scored rushing touchdowns last week. And looking at Drake May, I expect similar production where he can get some solid rush attempts this week. But then looking at the passing volume, obviously, Stephon Diggs, Kayshon Boutte, and as well as Hunter Henry all be very relevant options for this team last week. And I think it's going to be enough for him to shred up Miami. Miami's just a dumpster fire, and they continue to get worse and worse as the season goes on. Travis Etienne at running back is my coming in clutch player of the week at running back. 61% snap share last week, 65% of the running back opportunities, 156 yards, 3 receptions. And then the Eagles traded for Tank Bigsby. The Jaguars sent him away. So they saw what they had in Travis Etienne week 1. They saw that he could be the lead back, saw that he could be the guy, and they realized they have way too many backups, and they were like, well, we can trade this guy away. So they traded away Tank Bigsby. I think the offer could have been on the table before week 1, and then the Jaguars just said, hey, we're going to start Travis Etienne this week and see what he can do, and then we'll make our decision based off that. And Travis Etienne showed out. So I expect him to continue to be the clear-cut starting back. That's why he's in my coming in clutch players of the week. He gets a matchup with the Cincinnati Bengals this week, whose defense that we know is susceptible. They have a lot of holes in their roster on that defense, especially on the line. So I expect ETN to be a great fantasy running back this week. Now, looking at wide receiver, my coming in clutch player of the week for that position is Khalil Shakir. He had a really solid game last week with 6+ catches. But looking at this game, I'm really excited to see what we see. The Bills are not afraid of a shootout. We just saw it last week, 40-41 against the Baltimore Ravens. Both teams should have great defenses this year, and they got a shootout last week. And the Jets, we just saw their offense blow up against the Pittsburgh Steelers, which should be a good defense. So we have the Bills, Jets, both good offenses, both good defenses. I think we see another shootout with Justin Fields, his electric upside. Same with Josh Allen, the other side of the football. And looking at Khalil Shakir's matchup in the slot against the Jets last year gave up the second most fantasy points to the slot position. And Khalil Shakir runs in there a lot. And then you saw in the Jets in week 1, they gave up a huge week to Calvin Austin, who played over 45% of the snaps in the slot last week. Huge game for him, 4 for 71. I expect a big game for a very talented receiver who can make some big plays in after the catch in Khalil Shakir. Now, looking at tight end, Hunter Henry is my tight end coming in clutch player of the week. I'm stacking quarterback and tight end like I did last week against the Miami Dolphins, hoping it works out again for me this week. Hunter Henry had 8 targets last week. He went 4 for 66. I think he just gives you a 4-ish catch floor with about 50+ yards floor. It's just that's his floor. It's just he's a volume earner. He earns targets. It's somewhat boring because he's not like a crazy juiced athlete, but he is a very capable tight end. And looking at Miami matchup, it's great. So you're going to see potentially more targets, a lot of end zone opportunity, and that's why Hunter Henry is my play of the week. Because not only do you get a floor of probably 8-ish points, but you have serious upside if you were to get in the end zone or earn an extra couple targets against a susceptible defense. Now, going to my Oh Fudge players of the week at quarterback, I'm picking Baker Mayfield. If you ignore the passing touchdowns, he had terrible stats last week. 17 for 32, 167 through the air. Didn't look great. I mean, he had a really severe loss of weapons this offseason with Chris Godwin not being healthy, Jalen Millen not being healthy, Cade Otton not being healthy, Mike Evans being a little on the older side. But he got 3 touchdowns last week, and that's what made him good for fantasy. I don't expect the same production this coming week against the Houston Texans, because the thing about the Houston Texans, their offense also looked dysfunctional last week. CJ Stroud does not look like he's good. He's playing well right now. Nico Collins is the only receiver on that team that can do anything consistently, and their running back room is a disaster. Offensive line is a disaster. So I just don't see this team or this game putting up a lot of points, and as a result, I just don't like Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield's best when he's throwing the football a lot in some high-scoring, fly-high matchups. I just don't see that coming out of Houston, Tampa Bay this week. So I'm out on Baker Mayfield. Now let's go to Alvin Kamara. He's my running back, Oh Fudge player of the week. San Francisco's run defense last week against the Seattle Seahawks looked very suffocating. We know what the Seattle Seahawks want to do. They want to run the football. They made that very clear this offseason. They made that very clear in week 1. They weren't able to do it very effectively. Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet, both very talented backs, got absolutely suffocated by the San Francisco run defense. It seems like they got a lot of young players that are hitting right now. And with Alvin Kamara, we know he's a little older. He looked okay in week 1. I expect a really rough game in the running game in week 1 and then week 2, sorry. And then when you look at the receiving upside, he only had 2 catches last week. And Spencer Rattler seems to want to put the football elsewhere than Alvin Kamara's hands. And as a result, I'm just not feeling Alvin Kamara this week. I think we see maybe a 14 for 38 stat line and then a couple catches. And unless he scores a touchdown, I just don't think he's getting you 10 points. So I'm out. Now, looking at Calvin Ridley, he's my wide receiver, Oh Fudge player of the week. Cam Ward looked really solid last week. He looked very capable as a quarterback, but the fantasy connection wasn't really there between him and Calvin Ridley just yet. It's just not fully there yet. It's going to take some time, going to take some weeks for it to fully get connected, but for now, it's just not there. And the LA Rams looked fantastic on defense last week against the Houston Texans. Nico Collins didn't have a great game. CJ Stroud didn't have a great game, and I don't expect Cam Ward or Calvin Ridley to either. So I'm benching Ridley in fantasy football this week if you can. And then lastly, my tight end bench this week, or my tight end Oh Fudge player of the week, I'm putting him on my bench. That is Travis Kelce. I play Harold Fannin over him. I play Juwan Johnson over him. I play Hunter Henry over him. I play Jake Ferguson over him. I play Kyle Pitts over him. Like these low end, bottom of the barrel tight end 1s or even tight end 2s. These are guys I'm playing over Travis Kelce this week. And the argument is very simple. He looked bad last week. He looked like a 35-year-old tight end. He looked clunky. He looked slow. He didn't look like the Travis Kelce of old. And Rashee Rice was out. Xavier Worthy got knocked out on like almost the first play of the game. And Travis Kelce was still not able to earn more than a 10.5% target share. It was his lowest target share since 2017. Like, it's just, he was out targeted by Tyquan Thornton and Juju Smith-Schuster and Marquise Brown. Like, this is not the same Travis Kelce we've seen in years past, and this is not a Travis Kelce that's going to be good for fantasy. He scored a touchdown last week and on a nice catch, and that made him good for fantasy, but otherwise he was awful. I just don't want him in my fantasy lineups this week, especially considering the matchup this week is against the Philadelphia Eagles, who not only he collapsed against in the Super Bowl, but they have an excellent linebacker core. Their weakness is not over the middle of the field. It's on the outside, that cornerback 2 spot after Quinyon Mitchell. So I expect a lot of targets for those outside receivers this week, not for Travis Kelce. Now it's going to be it for my Oh Fudge Players of the Week. Now we're moving on to the listener Q&A segment of the show. I got 4 questions to answer. Let's run through them real quick. Keon Coleman against the New York Jets or Tyrone Tracy against the Dallas Cowboys. Already have James Cook and Dalton Kincaid in my lineup. Look, it's simple. I understand that you already have 2 Bills, but Keon Coleman is the better player, the better talent, and he has the better opportunity this week against the Jets, who I think on defense, they're susceptible a little bit. Their offense is good enough. I think this could be a high-scoring game, and Keon Coleman looked fantastic last week. Tyrone Tracy, this Giants offense is absolutely destroyed right now. Like, we're considering benching Russell Wilson after week 1. That's how bad it looked last week. And it's just, this offense ain't moving. Cam Skadaboo's a little bit involved. I'm just out on Tyrone Tracy right now. And this Giants backfield as a whole, Keon Coleman looked good. Play him. Coming off a hot game, Kyle Pitts versus Minnesota, or the new toy in Harold Fannin versus Baltimore. I'm going with Kyle Pitts here. Drake London and Darnell Mooney are coming back from injury, so they could be somewhat limited, and Darnell Mooney has a severe risk of re-injuring that shoulder. So looking at the Minnesota game, I think this is going to be high scoring. J.J. McCarthy in that fourth quarter, we saw the upside of this offense and what it can be. And in Atlanta, we saw the same thing too last week with Michael Penix looking really good. I think this is going to be a really fun game on Sunday Night Football, and I expect big production out of Kyle Pitts. I expect another, 7 to 8 target week, potentially 5 to 7 catches, and at least 50 yards. I expect another really solid game from Kyle Pitts. And now Calvin Ridley versus the Rams, or Emeka Buka versus Houston. Now, I said I don't love Baker Mayfield this week, but in this one, I'm going to start Emeka Buka just because I know the volume's going to be there. The rest of this offense is still injured. We saw the great volume last week, and when you get volume to a first-round talent like Emeka Buka in his rookie debut, you don't stop targeting him. He's going to continue to earn touches, continue to earn the football, and we know what kind of route runner he is. We know what kind of threat he is when you get inside the 20-yard line. I expect a potential touchdown this week, as like we saw 2 touchdowns last week. And then lastly, Juwan Johnson or Harold Fannin Jr.? This is a great question. 2 for waiver wire wonders this week. I'm going with Harold Fannin Jr. because with Juwan Johnson, we know he's a solid tight end, but nothing more than that. That's all we know. That's what he is, and he could get you like 10 points this week again with like a 5 for 50 stat line. But it's also not a guarantee. He can go out and catch 3 passes. We've seen Juwan Johnson do this for fantasy over the last couple of years. But he has a couple of those games where it's like, ooh, he went 4 for 48 and 1 this week. Let's start him again this week. And then he goes like 2 for 10. Harold Fannin Jr., however, while he could bust and go straight back to being backup to David Njoku, I highly doubt it. A 3rd-round rookie tight end doing what he did is unheard of. I think he's going to continue to earn targets, and we know he's an athletic beast. He ran some routes last week that looked like a wide receiver. Like, he was just unbelievably athletic last week. He made some great plays, and I expect him to continue against a team that the Browns are going to have to throw against in the Baltimore Ravens. And then now we're going to jump into the last segment of the show, the over-unders with Howard Bender from Fantasy Alarm. See y'all soon. All right, everybody, we're back, and we've brought on a friend. Please welcome on Mr. Howard Bender. He's at RotoBuzzGuy on Twitter, head of content over at Fantasy Alarm, FSGA member, award-winning host over at SiriusXM Fantasy Radio. Howard Bender, welcome to the show. It's good to have you, man.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. I'm very excited about this invite. It's great to see you, Hutch. I mean, listen, you've been killing it, man, and I absolutely love watching your ascent through the industry. I'm a little upset that you had Andy Behrens on instead of before me, but whatever. It's okay. I'm not too hurt.
Yeah, I had to have on Andy because during the over-under segment, what we do, the history of it is that he's the only guy to go 3-0. He's the only person I've had on ever to go 3-0 for the
Ah.
over under. So I was like, I got to get him back. And last week was unfortunate. He went 1 for 3. I went 0 for 3. So Howard, you and me got to have a better week this week. So we're to jump in to the theme of week 2. It is waiver wire wonders, meaning players that you're going to pick up off waiver wires this week. How are they going to do in week 2? So we're going to start with, I don't know how you feel about this guy, Howard. It's going to be exciting to see. One of my favorite players in fantasy right now, Harold Fannin Jr., tight end for the Cleveland Browns. I don't know if you saw my post throughout the offseason, Howard. I was one of the Harold Fannin guys in the Twitter world. So last week we saw a 72% snap share. He went 7 of 9 on his targets for 63 yards. And he looked really athletic doing so, ran some really good routes, earned the trust of Joe Flacco early. So this coming week, he gets the Baltimore Ravens. And Baltimore just let up Dalton Kincaid. He went 4 for 48 and 1. So Harold Fannin's line right now on most sites is about 39.5 yards. So what do we think about Harold Fannin Jr. over or under 39.5 yards? Howard, I'll throw it to you.
I'm going to take the under on this for Harold
Mm.
Fannin. Listen, I get it. Everybody loves Harold Fannin. Love this kid. But was his success and his target share last week due to the fact that, well, we all know who David Njoku is, and we all know that we have to pay attention, but you're facing a team like Cincinnati, who doesn't cover. They were dead last in DVOA covering the tight end last year. They're horrible. And they didn't do anything to fix their secondary or really their linebacker core coming into this season. They've got Shamar Stewart. They got Trey Hendrickson. These guys are great pass rushers. But are they covering the tight end? So, I feel like Fannin, who, still played a smaller snap share than David Njoku, ran fewer routes than David Njoku did. I feel like if we're talking about putting them up against Baltimore, I just think that there's going to be less work to go around, less open on the field. So I think the under is where I'm at.
I got you, Howard. I'm gonna disagree with you here. I think this is a really good line. I'm not gonna lie, because I think less yards is a very good argument for next week. Even though we could see as a rookie him uh,
Evolve.
evolving. Sorry, I almost said evolutionize. I was like, that is not a word. Evolving into this offense, acclimating, becoming a much better player. Because the thing is, when you see a third round rookie tight end earn 9 targets in week 1 with this already established vet on the team, it's really hard to deny that kid's talented. And even a tough matchup against Baltimore, I think he's going to get the over on 39.5, just because even with like 2-3 catches, he could hit this mark. He's got insane yards after catch ability. He can work downfield. He can run routes downfield. So I think we see 1 or 2 big plays, and I think he just barely reaches 40 yards. So I'm going to take the over just barely there. Now with Quentin Johnston, let's talk about Quentin Johnston. How do you feel about Johnston, Howard? We're going over under 3.5 catches at the Las Vegas Raiders last week. 5 of 7 of his targets he caught for 79 yards, 2 touchdowns thrown from Justin Herbert. He looked great, had some great plays. And then when you look at the target share between the Chargers wide receivers overall, each of Keenan Allen, Ladd McConkey, and Quentin Johnson saw between 7 and 10 targets. The offense was very consolidated between these 3 guys. What do we think of Quentin Johnson over under 3.5 catches at the Las Vegas Raiders?
I'm going to take the over on this. And, listen, I'm not a huge Quentin Johnston fan, but, because he struggles to get separation sometimes, but, he's also not bad against contested catches. If you look at the receivers that they've got, I thought that Trey Harris was going to come in and just take over as the big split end on that team. Keenan Allen is likely to see more work than him in 2 receiver sets if the play calling is for the short passing game. Like, McConkey and Keenan Allen, they're going to help move the chains downfield. But you know what? On third downs, big third down and 10, third and 12, whatever it's going to, could end up being, I could see some longer work going to Quentin Johnston. He really turned out last week. Again, not a huge fan of the guy, but can he catch 4 passes this week against the Raiders on Monday Night Football? If he doesn't come down with the Vegas virus, yeah, probably.
Yeah, this is honestly, this is a really good line for me. The only thing I'm really worried about potentially for this game is that I think the Raiders, obviously when you look at the Raiders, Pete Carroll, Ashton Genty, the way they want to slow the game down, play better defense, run the football, And the Chargers are happy to play this game too. I mean, we saw Justin Herbert command this offense last week against KC, but that was turning into a bit of a shootout. That game ended 27-24. It was a bit of a higher scoring game. I think in this one, we're going to see less passing attempts, but still, I think there's going to be just enough for Quentin Johnson to get to 4 receptions. So I'm going to take the over as well. I just think that he looked really good last week. I thought he ran better routes. I thought his route tree looked more polished. On the end of his routes, I thought created better separation than we've seen in years past. I think overall he looks like an elevated player compared to the last 2 years, because the first year was terrible. Then we saw some serious flashes in year 2 with 711 yards, 8 touchdowns. And then in year 3 in week 1, I think we really saw a difference. And the offseason has only shown us that he's grown as a player a lot. And I think this just makes sense for him as a talent. We know coming in as a first round pick, he was so raw. Like, he was not good at separating. He was not great at contested catches or timing. He was not great at footwork. With a technician was just not there in him. He was a raw athlete. And over the last couple of years, it seems like he's really starting to become a great football player, not just a great athlete. So I think he's going to be more established in this offense than people think. I'm going to take 4 receptions over there, agreeing with Howard here. And then the last one, let's talk about Danny Dimes. Daniel Jones had a fantastic game last week against the Miami Dolphins. 3 total touchdowns, rushing and passing for him. The Dolphins were absolutely crushed by the Colts in their offense. I think the final score is 33-8. And the 8 points that the Dolphins scored was on a 3rd and goal, 10 yards out, swing pass to Devon Achane for whatever reason they called that play. And Devon Achane was able to turn it into a score. So Daniel Jones, he gets Denver this week. Cam Ward had 0 touchdowns against Denver. And when you look at Denver's defense as a whole, last year, they averaged 1.52 touchdowns total rushing and passing allowed to the quarterback position. They were a really elite defense. They're looking elite this year. What are we thinking about Daniel Jones over under 1.5 total touchdowns against the Denver Broncos?
1.5 total touchdowns, or
Yeah,
1.5 passing touchdowns?
rushing and passing, 1.5 is the line.
Ooh.
It's
I'm just gonna take the under anyway, just because I think if you really want to move the ball against Denver, I think you really want to run it with Jonathan Taylor. I mean, that secondary is just, I mean, it is brutal. Like, Patrick Surtain, if he gets beaten in coverage at any point by Michael Pittman, he'll take Michael Pittman down and he'll take the penalty, right? He'll take the pass interference call rather than give up the big play. I do think it's going to be problematic for Daniel Jones this week, at least for the people who overinvested in his first start. Miami's a hot mess. They are atrocious. And I mean, it's top to bottom. It's, from Mike McDaniel to the personnel, nobody getting along. Everybody hates Tyreek. Everybody hates Mike McDaniel's style. Mike McDaniel doesn't make the necessary adjustments. So there's all sorts of unrest in Miami. And I just think that it's just a bad team. So Daniel Jones looked great, home start, getting that work. And I think he was kind of feeling his own. But for those people who are like, oh, he's the next Saquon Barkley, you leave the Giants, now you're headed for a career year. I don't think it's going to happen that way. I think the Denver defense clamps down significantly on Indianapolis. So I'll take the under 1.5. I think, maybe he squeezes one passing touchdown in if he's lucky, but I don't necessarily know if he's going to run one in on his own.
Yeah, I'm with you here. I think we're going to see a fall down to earth for Daniel Jones in week 2 against the Denver Broncos. I mean, I'm just going to say, I don't know if you're a betting man, but plus 120 for an interception for Daniel Jones right now is the bet on DraftKings.
Crazy, right?
I think that's one of the better bets this week. If I'm not gonna lie, if you're gonna take a bet, that's a good one to make. I mean, that passing defense, like you mentioned, is absolutely insane. And like you mentioned, Miami, they're an absolute dumpster fire. When you think of some of, like, not necessarily just the worst teams in the NFL in terms of record, but like some of the worst situations right now in the NFL. You think of Cleveland with Deshaun Watson, how that turned out in their current quarterback purgatory. You think of the Saints, they're in cap hell right now, and Spencer Rattler's their quarterback, and Tyler Shuck has looked terrible all off season. He's not starting. We don't know what he is. And he was like 26 years old coming out of college, a 2nd-round pick at a small school. That pick did not make any sense to me personally. And then you think of the Dolphins. Mike McDaniel, like you mentioned, he seems like he's falling apart as a head coach for this team. Tyreek Hill is a mess. Tua is a mess, and they have him on a giant contract right now. That defense, especially in the secondary, is absolutely atrocious. They got nobody. They lost Jalen Ramsey and Xavier Howard. They're just cooked right now. So I think Daniel Jones, after having such a great matchup in week 1, falls down to earth in week 2 against Pat Surtain. I think we get at least 1 reception. So that bet on DraftKings, keep an eye on that one.
So it all comes down to you and me and Harold Fannin. Is that
Yes,
what it
sir.
is?
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, we agreed on the other two with Johnson going over and Jones going under 1.5 total touchdowns. Now it's about Fannin. I'm taking the over. You're taking the under there on his 39.5 yards. So, Howard, real quick before we wrap up this segment and this show, any last minute advice for the people in week 2 of fantasy football?
Oh, good heavens.
I know, such a question.
I mean, there's so much going on. I mean, it's
Yeah, man.
crazy. Stop overthinking so many of your matchups. A lot of what you saw in week 1 is really not what it's going to be. And that's just something that you have to really kind of pay attention to and understand that, it's just the nature of what happens. You get a lot of teams that they don't play their guys during the preseason at all. So they're coming in ice cold, right? I mean, Jamar Chase, AJ Brown, Terry McLaurin, Nico Collins, they're all sitting there like I saw the milk carton memes that were going on for these guys.
Yeah.
This is what happens. So don't panic, don't overthink, and for goodness sake, trust in your draft, people. Like there's certain things, like if you took a guy in the 12th or 13th round of your draft because you think he has upside and has possibly a path to carries or targets or something like that, give him more than a week to marinate a little bit before you start cutting them for whoever the flavor of the week is. I mean, it is just absolutely amazing. It's unreal. It really is, because you sit there and you spend all this time doing all of this research and you pulling out names like, Kyle Monangai and Jadon Blue and Elik Ayamanor. And if these guys don't like absolutely pop usage wise or stat wise, then people are so quick to give up on them to pick up the Quentin Johnstons off the waiver wire. So just don't panic. Don't panic. Trust in the work that you did, the research ahead of time.
I love it. A word I've used a lot during the week is discernment. Week 1 is all about how discerning you are. You got to look at situations. Obviously, there are some things that are going to stick. There are some things that you have to pay attention to, and there are some things that really aren't. And you have to discern that really, really well and do your best to look at, okay, what happened this week? Is this replicatable in the future weeks? Is this something that's going to continue over and over? And that's something you got to look for. But and also something you got to think about, like you kind of said, I think week 2 is kind of a redo. Like you just kind of redo everything where you're like, okay, fresh start after week 1. Everyone's got everyone's got it out. Let's get in now. Let's go and lock in. Let's lock in week 2 and see what happens. And then you can go from there. But I agree. Start the guys you drafted to be your studs, because not a lot of injuries this week, especially at the running back position. Start the guys you drafted to be your studs and go from there. But without further ado, it's going to be it for Hutch Coming in Clutch. And it's going to be it for this segment. Howard, thank you so much for joining the show. One last thing, man. Tell people where they can find you and your content. What's been going on big for you right now in the fantasy football world?
All right. I mean, listen, I'm all over fantasyalarm.com, Fantasy Alarm's YouTube page. I'm doing shows Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday on the Fantasy Alarm YouTube page at 1 p.m. Eastern. SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio, Fantasy Alarm Show, Monday through Friday, 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern. Sunday mornings, 10 a.m. Eastern. You guys can find me over there. I write for the New York Post. And I do a little work for rtsports.com. You can find the old Weekly Bender, which is like my Monday hot takes rant on what we just saw, kind of an article. So that's where you can find me. Oh, and I'm at RotoBuzz Guy all over the social media.
Yes, sir. Make sure to follow him over there. Thank you all so much for tuning in to Hutch Coming in Clutch, Jay. Greatly, greatly appreciate you. Follow me on Twitter at HutchSimB_FF. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening, so you'll be notified every single time a new episode does drop. And that's going to be all for today. Best of luck in your week 2 fantasy football matchups. We'll see you all next week with the biggest headlines and takeaways from week 2.